What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Getaway Day. I am Mason. He's Gautam. And we are back for episode 37. This is our first episode of the off-season. We took a week off or roughly a week and a half off between the World Series and this Wednesday, our new time. Just to kind of decompress from the season and start getting our mindset for the off-season ahead. And Gautam, how was your week and a half off?
Good. It's been a while since we podcasted because we were doing so many podcasts during the playoffs and everything, but it's nice to get back to it.
Oh yeah. I don't know that I remember how to do this. So
we'll learn together.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So before we get into today's episode, though, if you enjoy our podcast, have enjoyed it in the past, or whatever, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. You can find us on pretty much any podcasting app you can possibly use. Just search for Getaway Day, semicolon, right? Semicolon has a comma.
This is not a grammar podcast.
Sorry. Getaway Day, MLB podcast. And then if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review and let us know what you think. We also have a Facebook and Twitter account that is at Getaway Day Pod that we tweet a lot of information about the podcast whenever we are going to record a new episode, post a new episode, are going to open some baseball cards, etc. So make sure to follow us there and just in general, just let us know what you think of the podcast. If you haven't noticed, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, things look a little bit different today. And there is a very good reason for that. So we've been, 36 episodes over the course of a full season, and I don't know about you, Gautam, but I am very much enjoying doing this podcast. And I thought it was time for a little bit of a glow up. So I think the picture of the back of my Fernando Tatis jersey has served us well as the logo for the podcast. But I thought it was time for something new. What do you say we unveil it for everybody right now?
Let's do it.
Right. So our new logo, created by Evie Brosius, is here on the screen if you're watching us. And if you're not, we will post this to our Facebook and Twitter for anyone listening on a podcasting app. But it is a gorgeous logo. Absolutely love it. Incredibly classic. I don't have enough good words to say about it, but if you guys love or like our new logo, let us know, and we'll tag Evie in the Facebook and Twitter postings there. Let her know if you like her work, because it is a really, really good logo. So yeah. So this is
Thanks,
now.
Evie.
Yeah, thank you, Evie. So this is the new branding for Getaway Day. So we will be pushing that out to all of our social media accounts here in the next couple of days. But for now, we have some podcasting to do. All right. So since it's been a week and a half, we've had a lot of stuff happen that we have not talked about. So we kind of ignored a lot of stuff around managers, potential options, qualifying offers that we're going to get extended to players. So let's take a look into that. Gowie, you want to kick us off with some information on the managers? What jobs became available this year? Just kind of catch everyone up there.
Yeah, so the first one was the Padres, Jace Tingler. This one came out a few days before the end of the regular season, that Jace Tingler would not be back with the Padres. Luis Rojas will not. He lost his job with the Mets, and then Mike Schilt, in the surprising move of the offseason, was also let go by the Cardinals.
Yeah, when Jace Tingler got let go in the offseason, or during the regular season, sorry, that one was a little bit of a shock to me, just because he'd only been 2 years, and he'd done a pretty solid job, but they didn't make it to the postseason this year, and I think the ownership just knows that they need a guy who can make the most of this team, because this team is way too talented to go like 500. So, but yeah, the Schilt, that was a bit of a bombshell. I don't think anyone understood that at the time. It was for quote unquote philosophical differences. So, yeah, so the Cardinals moved on from Schilt, intending to keep the entire coaching staff, meaning that there was probably some kind of a rift between the front office and the coaching staff and the way that Mike Schilt was operating. John Mozeliak kind of came out and said a couple more things about it and kind of led us to believe that that's kind of what it was. Schilt is kind of more of a managed by feel guy. They wanted to go with more of a analytical approach. So yeah. So
yeah, with Schilt, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Schilt's managing style in general, but I definitely do not think that he deserved to lose his job. But it's one of those things where if your bosses don't really like you and you're kind of being an obstinate kind of person, then you're not going to be kept very long. And I guess that's pretty much what happened there.
yeah, the other thing that surprised me is, if I remember correctly, Mike Schilt had just got an extension. Like,
I don't think so. I think he had one more year, right?
Well, I thought that they had just extended him because he had one more year left. They gave him the extension, and then at the end of year meetings, they realized there was kind of a rift. Am I remembering that incorrectly?
I don't think he had an extension.
Oh, they were talking extension is what it was.
Yeah.
So they went from talking extension to all of a sudden he's fired. And
this is one that was not on anyone's radar until it happened, basically.
Yeah. Which left a huge hole in what I think would probably be considered one of the premier franchises in Major League Baseball. This is the third time the Cardinals have changed managers since 2011. So 10 years, 3 managers. That's very unlike anything the Cardinals have ever done. But yeah, so we have seen some managers get hired to fill these spots. The Cardinals ended up promoting bench coach Ali Marmol to manager, and then hired Skip Schumacher from the Padres to then take his place as bench coach. So, first-time manager for the Cardinals. Ali Marmol is, I can't remember the exact stat, and I keep saying I'm going to look it up, and then I keep forgetting to look it up. But he's like the second Dominican American first-year manager hired to a team that had won, or that had a winning record the previous year. Or it was some kind of weird stat, but it was essentially saying that the premier clubs haven't really gone with minority manager as a first-time manager really ever. And so Alex Cora and then now Ali Marmol is kind of the first two guys to kind of break that glass ceiling. So we're kind of starting to see a little bit of a shift here in managerial hires and just representation across baseball.
Yeah, completely agree. And we have definitely seen that managers who have been getting jobs are getting younger and younger, but it's also good to see now that they're coming from different backgrounds and the traditional, like, former players and just, white guys.
Yeah, and that's something that baseball has been quote unquote trying to do for a long time. The C-League rule required teams to interview a minority candidate for front office positions and I think field manager, right? Or was it just for any opening?
Manager. I think it was just front office, but not 100% sure.
Okay. But yeah, so they were required to interview a minority candidate, but there was no sort of other stipulations around it. As long as you had one guy in the room that qualified as a minority, then you met the C League rule. I know they just kind of modified the C League rule here in the last couple days. You paid attention to that a little bit more than I did, but what was the new rule with that? It's like if you internally promote a like a white or a white guy, you have to backfill him with a minority candidate.
Yeah, so I'll just read them out. So any club making an internal promotion for a senior baseball operations position must provide the commissioner's office with a succession plan for all of the club's senior baseball operations positions. That plan requires the club to include diverse individuals for future leadership positions. And then, in the event of a non diverse internal promotion, it's the commissioner's expectation that a diverse individual will be promoted or hired to a vacancy created by the promotion.
Okay, so the one thing that last set or that last kind of clause there makes me wonder is, so they're asking for a succession plan. So basically, as you promote one guy, you're going to promote the next guy to fill his spot, and etc. You're not necessarily going to go out and hire a new guy. So
Yep.
in that succession plan, you have to hire to fill the new vacancy. You have to put in a minority candidate. It doesn't have to be for the exact first position that was vacated. So like with let's just say this hasn't
So there's an
happened.
actual example of this in effect. So
Oh, there is?
the Rockies,
Perfect.
they promoted Bill Schmidt from their interim to permanent GM. So they've backfilled that position with the person of color Danny Montgomery, who was promoted to vice president and assistant GM of scouting.
Okay.
So they basically created a position that kind of takes the spot that Schmidt is leaving.
Okay. So the thing that I'm kind of curious about is if like Schmidt got promoted, they promoted the director of scouting. I don't know who it was, but pretend he's a white guy. He gets promoted to Schmidt's old job, or maybe Schmidt was the director of scouting, so that might not work. But anyway, and then his vacancy could be filled with a minority candidate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting rule. I think I like it. We'll definitely get a lot more representation coming up. It's not going to make massive changes in the immediate future, but 3, 4, 5 years down the road, we'll start to see a lot more diverse front offices as you start to see guys kind of moving from club to club, guys getting promoted. And I think boardrooms are going to start to have a little bit of a different feel. So yeah, it's nice to see that MLB is actually finally trying whenever they've been trying for years and it didn't change anything. But because since the C League rule went into effect, isn't there only like one more minority guy in like leadership than there was before the C League rule went into effect?
Yeah, so from 2010 through 2017, the number of minorities in control of a club's baseball operations department increased by only one.
Yeah. So you put a rule into effect that sounds good, does literally nothing, and I think now they're trying to fix that does literally nothing. And so this will definitely make some changes, and I'm kind of looking forward to see what happens here in the future. So but
I think that's a perfect segue into a team that may or may not be. I mean, they're definitely making changes. We're not sure if they're making the right changes. And that's the Mets, who finally concluded their GM search in hiring Billy Epler yesterday. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure, honestly. So Billy Epler came from, I don't think he had a job in baseball last year. I think he essentially had a year off. But up until 2020, he was the GM of the Angels. And he was replaced by Perry Manassian. Did I get it right?
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Yes. But yeah, so from 15 to 20, he was the GM of the Angels, got replaced by Perry Manassian. Kind of the big things that Epler had done with the Angels was bringing in Shohei Ohtani, I think is probably the single biggest thing he did for that franchise. And then he brought in guys like Anthony Rendon, Justin Upton, Andrelton Simmons. There was one other kind of big contract that he gave out, but I can't remember who it was, but it was not one of the good contracts. So I've not really seen Epler in his role with the Angels, which working for Artie Moreno is probably really hard to do. I'll just put that out there right now. But he didn't really do a very good job of building a team around Mike Trout. And so I'm not really sure that I trust him going into a dumpster fire like the Mets and making sense of everything. So that's kind of where I'm at. Plus, he was the last guy that hired Mickey Callaway, and the Mets really need to get out of that circle of people who had anything to do with any of those guys, from Zach Porter to Jared Porter, Zach Scott, Mickey Callaway. They need to clean house and get rid of anyone who was even remotely associated with those guys.
Yeah, like Sandy Alderson, but that's probably not going to be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this whole Mets thing has really just been a debacle. I mean, it's been really difficult for them to fill this position, and I don't know, maybe it's just the way that it's been reported on, but it seems like they went in a lot of directions. They didn't really know exactly what they were looking for. A lot of people kind of turned them down, and here they are with Billy Epler, and that's not. I don't necessarily think that Billy Epler is a bad hire, because he is an experienced GM. He had a tough situation in with the Angels, of course, but before he was with the Angels, he was a pretty successful guy as a part of the front office of the Yankees. So he's kind of well regarded.
He was the assistant to Cashman, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah. And so he's definitely got some good experience in his past. His recent history kind of gives me question marks with the way that the Mets have been running. I think the difference is he was in a bad situation with the Angels. 100%. I don't think anyone that is in the GM role for the Angels has got an easy job. It sounds like it would be a cakewalk because it's an LA team, but it hasn't really been that way ever. When he was with the Yankees are kind of a well-oiled machine. So he did a great job there, but he had support. And now he's going into a situation with the Mets where it took him this long to get a GM, because I think they were trying to hire a VP of baseball ops first. And every single person they interviewed for that or tried to interview either turned him down or the club didn't let them interview. I think because they said, don't let me interview. And so now they finally get going towards a GM, and Billy Epler's available. They get him, but I'm not sure that this is putting him in a much better opportunity for success than he was with the Angels, especially since there's no VP of baseball ops. So Sandy Alderson is going to be operating in that capacity next year. So, yeah, it's kind of a dumpster fire of a team, isn't it?
Yeah, yep. They got a lot of work to do.
So, but now they've got a GM, so they need a manager. But who's left? Because we haven't even talked about the other guys who've accepted jobs. So Ollie Marmol got the Cardinals job. Dusty Baker re-upped with the Astros for 1 year. Aaron Boone re-upped with the Yankees for 4 years? 3 years.
3 years, I think.
3 years. And then, shocker of the offseason, if you really, really pay attention, you probably knew he was available. But Bob Melvin had 1 year left on his contract with the A's, and the A's just let him go. And he is now the manager of the Padres. So Melvin's off the table. Baker's off the table. Boone's off the table. Luis Rojas joined the Yankees as the third base coach. He's off the table. Skip Schumacher, who was interviewing for managerial positions, and a lot of reporters have been saying like he's going to be one of the next new managers. He joined the Cardinals as the bench coach. Jace Tingler joined the Twins as a bench coach. He's off the table. Who's left?
That's a great question. I really don't know. It could be Buck Showalter if they want some old school experience. I really don't know though.
I mean, Mike Schilt's available, and Mike Schilt, I would not be shocked if he got a job, but there's another job available that he's probably also interviewing for. Because with Bob Melvin leaving the A's, that leaves a hole there too. So we go into the offseason with 3 openings. We hire 2 guys to new roles, and we still have 2 openings. So something with that math doesn't work out. But
But with the Melvin thing, that seems like the perfect hire for the Padres. Because Tingler kind of got knocked for not having any managerial experience before he took the job. Bob Melvin is as experienced as you would ever want from any manager, and he's been extremely successful in his time with the A's. I think that's going to be great for them.
Agreed. Yeah, Bob Melvin is. I thought he was going to stay with the A's, and I loved Bob Melvin with the A's. I think he's won Manager of the Year a couple times, hasn't he?
Yeah,
and it's well deserved because the A's don't put any money into their roster. Really, they're kind of the same way as the Rays, but less successful at developing players. So they just get a hodgepodge of guys that are kind of just past their prime, or they do get some young guys, or they make a lot of trades. And Bob Melvin has managed to figure it out pretty much every season. So him going over,
he does a great job mixing, matching with his teams, and just I think he gets the most out of all the rosters that he has. So that's kind of what the Padres need, because they have all the talent that you would want, like way more talent than the A's probably. And it'll be interesting to see how he does with that kind of group.
Yeah, same. Now, I do think that Jace Tingler got unfairly dinged for his team having so many injuries throughout the entire season of this last year, at least. But at the same time, I do think that they made a great move in getting Bob Melvin, and I think that they'll be a lot better off in the long term with Bob Melvin than they would have been with Jace Tingler. So, let's see. Anything else on the managers, or shall we move on?
One more thing on the manager. So we didn't really talk about Marmol that much, but he's obviously new to the managing game. He's never really done it at any level, right? Is that true? Or was he a manager in the minor leagues?
I believe he was a manager in the minor leagues, but he ended up getting promoted really quickly to the big league club as staff. Let's see. So he was drafted by the Cardinals in 2007. He's incredibly young. He's only 35 years old. Let's see here. He was the hitting coach of the Gulf Coast Cardinals, which is the rookie league in the Gulf Coast League. Doesn't exist anymore. It's now defunct with the minor league reorg. Then he was the manager of the Johnson City Cardinals in the Appalachian League. And then he managed the State College Spikes in the New York Penn League.
But regardless, he doesn't have that much.
And then he managed the Palm Beach Cardinals, which is the low A team. And then from managing the low A team, he became first base coach, bench coach, and now manager.
Yeah. So he's a complete wild card in terms of like how he's going to do with kind of handling the day-to-day pressures of being a major league manager, and from the perspective of like making decisions based on analytics and stuff, he's clearly got to be aligned with what the front office wants to do, and I think he most likely will be.
Yeah. So the reason that he was promoted was in his role as bench coach with the Cardinals. He was the guy that was basically the liaison between the on-field coaching staff and the analytics department. So he's like the guy in the clubhouse that knows about the analytics side. He's been trained. He was kind of in that succession of that Cardinals manager train where they all kind of learned from George Kissel. Mike Schilt got the book from George Kissel's son when Kissel died. Marmol got the book. So Marmol has been in the Cardinals like succession line as far as grooming him to be a manager. I think where he's probably going to see a lot of benefit is with them keeping the entire coaching staff together. They fired the assistant hitting coach and then had to backfill his spot. That's the only changes to the coaching staff. Mike Maddox is still there for the pitchers. Jeff Albert, for better or worse, depending on if you're one of the Cardinals fans that thinks he's the devil or one that thinks that he just hasn't really got a shot yet because Schilt didn't like him. He's still there. Stubby Clapp has a lot of managerial experience and he's there still. So I think he's being put in the best position he can as a first-time manager who hasn't really managed in the upper minors. So we'll see. Big question mark. I'm a little concerned, but also really excited to see how it goes. So, all right. Anything else on managers?
Nope.
All right. So now we've had roughly 3 weeks of transactions from options being picked up and declined. Or did that really just start right after the World Series?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. There's no like moratorium on transactions. I think it just starts like right after the World Series ends. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but that's just the way it works.
Yeah. I mean, this year it probably pays off because December 2nd, we could be in a lockout. So not a whole lot's going to get done then. So it's probably helping us have as close to a regular starting day next year. But yeah, we've started seeing options being picked up and declined. Some guys have been retiring. There's been a lot of guys getting DFA'd to clear spots in the 40-man. The qualifying offers have been put out. So let's start with the options. So there's been a lot of guys. I believe there were 41 guys that had some kind of option, be it club, player, mutual, opt-out built into their contract. You want to talk us through some of the notables that got declined?
Yeah, sure. So Kyle Seager from the Mariners, he had a fairly sizable option that was not picked up by Seattle.
I think it was a $20 million option, I think.
Okay, yeah. So quite a bit of money. Seager's obviously a pretty good player, but kind of made sense that they were going to move on, even though he's been with the team for so long. Andrew McCutchen was not picked up. He had an okay season. Seems like he's still got a little bit left in the tank, but he's definitely not anywhere near the player he used to be.
Yeah, that one just kind of shocked me. I mostly because I just didn't hear about it. I was reading through the transaction wire today trying to prepare for this, and he was the one name that popped up that I thought was still on the team. So,
a few outfielders in Schwarber, Jock Peterson, and Avisail Garcia, they all declined their mutual options with their respective teams. So they're all going to be free agents. And I mean, there's always a lot of guys on the free agent market like this. These kind of like corner outfield type guys that pretty good hitters, not really known for their defense that much.
yeah.
Not the most difficult guys to find in free agency.
Yeah, but also we're not surprised that those three declined their options. We pretty much knew that Schwarber and Peterson were. Avasile was not really talked about, but when you look at the contract that he had for next year, if he would have taken the option, he's definitely going to eclipse that in free agency. So not really surprised at any of those.
And then the one player opt-out was Nick Castiganos, who had an opt-out. Did he have an opt-out after his first season as well?
I think he might have, but because of the short season and everything, and
he also didn't have the best 2020 season, but he did have, I think, a career best 2021 season, which made it an obvious decision to not pick up the remaining 2 years and 32 million on his deal. So he's going to be a free agent, and he's going to be one of the most sought after outfielders out there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about him is, so he opted out. So the Reds then gave him a qualifying offer, which is 1 year, 18.4 mil. He turned that down as well. Also not surprising, but I think he's like the one guy that basically had like 2 or 3 chances to stay with the same team and still is becoming a free agent. So I just thought that was interesting. Yeah, so there were a lot of other guys that either declined their options or the club declined their options. More club option declines than mutuals or player option declines, and to be completely fair. But that's not surprising. As far as options picked up, there was really only one that was not really notable. Like, we knew it was going to happen. But the Cleveland Guardians, it is now officially the Guardians. They settled a lawsuit with the roller derby team. They're both going to use the name Guardians. But yeah, the Cleveland Guardians picked up Jose Ramirez's club option for 2022. I guess my question to you, Gowie, their payroll is incredibly low. They don't really seem to be competitive this year, at least as the roster stands right now, in that division. What are their plans with J-Ram? Like, he's on an incredibly team-friendly deal right now.
Yep.
What do they?
He's got
what do
this
they do?
year on the low club option, then basically the same club option again for 2023. So they could keep him. Basically, it's always 3 options, right? You either trade him, you keep him the whole way, or you extend him. And I mean, the Guardians just don't have a history of really doling out big money contracts. So it's hard to see them like agreeing to an extension that's going to make sense for Jose Ramirez, considering that he is one of the premier players, especially as a third baseman that plays great defense. He is like your 5-tool player essentially, and he yeah, I don't know like whether he's going to find anything really agreeable in terms of an extension with the team. And then that really leaves only one option, I think, for their team based on what they always do, and that's trade their star players for huge prospect hauls. So I guess it's really a question whether they trade them this offseason or next offseason or sometime during the middle of the season.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too, especially with them having another club option. Like, they might try and roll with it this year, see what happens. Definitely are trading him next offseason to recoup some value.
I'm kind of leaning towards them actually entertaining a lot of offers this offseason because they waited until the year before Lindor's contract was up, and they ended up getting what I would consider a bit of a lackluster return. So maybe they don't want to risk that again, and they want to get as much value as they possibly can, and that would be in trading him this offseason.
Well, and if I remember correctly, Lindor's dollar figure, due to arbitration, or I don't remember if he had signed out or signed for the rest of his ARB years at a certain value, but his contract was more money than J-Ram's is now. Isn't J-Ram's like $6 a year or something stupid low?
It's like 13 million for the next each of the next 2 seasons, I think.
Still, that's so ridiculously low.
Yeah. Lindor is making a lot more that season.
So even if they hold on to next year, you would assume that they would get a better return on J-Ram. But if they were to trade him this year, they could pretty well jumpstart their next competitive window. So we'll see. And I mean, it would be really complicated, and there's no way for me to like sit here and come up with the scenario off the top of my head. But if they could somehow get a 3 or 4 team trade with J-Ram in there, where there's a lot of stuff going back to Cleveland, that they could swing it with how low his contract is and the fact that there's 2 years. If they could get multiple teams in there and get a lot of good young pieces to kickstart that. I don't want to say rebuild, because I don't think they're going to have to rebuild. They have a lot of good pieces in the minors. Their pitching staff is still great. Their lineup is just kind of not good.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think they could get back into being competitive pretty quickly if they trade him this offseason. So, all right. What else happened this last week and a half? What do you got?
Well, the Cubs made a move. They picked up Wade Miley on waivers, which was, I thought, an encouraging sign as a Cubs fan, and very discouraging if you're a Reds fan, because they, instead of picking up his $10 million option, they just basically put him on waivers so they wouldn't have to pay his $1 million buyout. How about that?
That is the stupidest move ever. On that.
Yeah, and the Cubs capitalized, and now they have a second starting pitcher that they can actually pencil into their rotation behind Kyle Hendricks. So, I mean, you got to start somewhere, and Wade Miley's a pretty solid pitcher. You kind of know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah. He's definitely not your number one, but he's always like floor number 3 starter. And last year he threw a no-hitter. So, and he's a big lefty in the rotation there too. So, it's a great pickup for the Cubs there. And the fact that they got him on waivers, what in the world is Cincinnati doing? Notice how I didn't drop an F-bomb this time.
And 5 teams let him just pass through, because the Cubs are, I think, 6th in the claim list.
Yeah, what the heck? Like, it's a $1 million buyout. His $10 million option, entirely reasonable.
Yeah, we're gonna get into some of these pitching deals, but $10 million for a pitcher that's you can pretty, barring injury, he's gonna give you at least 140 to 150 innings at the minimum.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd pencil him in for a solid like 27 to 30 starts, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
And
there's a lot of value in that. Like, we were forgetting how important just eating innings is. When the Cubs have one starter that they can rely on before they added Miley, which is...
Well, and his option was just barely over half of the qualifying offer. The Reds, just the last couple of years, I don't understand it. They went from not really trying to compete, but having a couple of dudes in Joey Votto, at the time, Eugenio Suarez. They had started putting together a bit of a rotation around Luis Castillo. Then they went all in for 2020 of all years. Got Castiganos. They had Sonny Gray, Trevor Bauer, couple of these other guys. They had some big arms in the bullpen in Raisel Iglesias and Amir Garrett. And it looked like this team was going to try and compete for the foreseeable future. Fast forward a year, Bauer's gone. Eugenio Suarez falls off a cliff.
So does Moustakas.
Yeah, Moustakas. Votto rebounded. That was great. They had 2 great young rookies come up, and Jonathan India, who just won Rookie of the Year. Tyler Stevenson, who looks like he's going to be their catcher of the future. And then now Nick Castiganos opts out, not surprising. And they just DFA Wade Miley? Like, this team waffles more than the Waffle House cook. Like, it's a really bad saying.
And this specific transaction is clearly not something that is, it's not just a decision that's being made by the baseball operations people. This one's coming directly from the ownership saying that, hey, our payroll is this much, and it's very much lower than what it had been in the last 2 years.
And he's not the only guy that they did that to. I mean, we're going to talk about a couple of signings and trades here. Well, probably not trades. There's not really a whole lot that's happened. But they traded their catcher, Tucker Barnhart, to Detroit for third base prospect Nick Quintana, who really hasn't been that big of a prospect. He hasn't really done all that well.
Even. Yeah.
He's just in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
But they traded Tucker mostly because of the money on his contract. Like, yes, they do have Tyler Stevenson. They're kind of clearing a pathway there for him. But there are other ways to get Stevenson in that lineup, too. And Tucker is one of the better defensive catchers in the league. When he gave up switch hitting, his hitting kind of took off again. Well, relative to his hitting before. Still not like an elite hitter by any means, but... So they get rid of Barnhart. They get rid of Miley. And now their payroll is what, $20? And it all goes to Joey Votto?
Yeah, pretty much.
But
we'll see if they continue with that and maybe trade Castillo and Sonny Gray. That'll be a big blow to the Reds fans. And they'll be, I don't know. I don't see how they're going to be competitive this year.
Yeah, I don't either. But no, if they get rid of both Barnhart and Castillo in the same offseason, those are the two fan favorites for Reds fans. And I say that as a guy who lives in Reds country. Like, Barnhart's not the best catcher in the league, but they love him. He's from Brownsburg, Indiana, which is just on the northwest side of Indianapolis. So this is they love him. He's a local guy. And then Castillo has been here since he was a rookie. They love their players. It will destroy that fan base if they get rid of both in the same offseason because of money. So, let's see here. The Reds done anything else stupid? Did they DFA Amir Garrett?
I don't think so.
No. I think people were asking for him to get DFA'd because he had a really bad season this year. But for some reason, that just crossed my mind here a minute ago. I mean, that's really the only waiver claim that was even remotely notable. There were, 12 players that changed teams on waivers this offseason so far. Most of them are like just barely claiming a spot on the 26-man roster. So, let's see, qualifying offers. What do you got?
Yeah, so there was a ton of guys that got this offer for the $18.4 million for 1 year. Obviously, it really hurts. It kind of hurts their markets because a lot of teams are kind of scared to take on the additional loss of draft pick compensation and international pool money. So kind of hinders their free agent markets if they end up declining. Some guys, it doesn't matter at all. So we'll get those guys out of the way first. Carlos Correa, Freddie Freeman, Robbie Ray, who just won the Cy Young. Eduardo Rodriguez has already signed. Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Trevor Story, and Nick Castellanos. Those guys all were obviously going to reject the qualifying offer, and they all did. The deadline was today.
And most of those guys, their single season AAV is probably going to be higher than 18.4. There's a couple that I don't think will get that for an average annual value, but they'll get a multi-year deal that's way better than having a single year at 18.4. So, yep.
Yeah. Let's just let's just talk about the remaining guys on this qualifying offer list and just go one by one here. So one guy that did accept the qualifying offer was Brandon Belt. And this one makes a lot of sense to me because he's 34. He has struggled with injuries a lot, and he's a
Inclu-
first baseman. There's
including
not
the end of
typically
this last season with the
yeah,
injuries.
right. And there's typically not a super robust first base market. And he would be competing with guys like Rizzo, Freddie Freeman. I think there's someone else out there, some other like relatively good first baseman. But I mean, he was not going to make 18.4 million over a multi-year contract. No way. And the thing is with the qualifying offer, like he's got that familiarity with the Giants, and he could easily agree to a multi-year deal with them even after having signed this qualifying offer now.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could find the other first baseman free agents, but for some reason I can't seem to find it. But yeah, no, this one makes a ton of sense. Just there was really, he's not going to get 18.4. I think if Brandon Belt were to be on the open market, especially this year, he's looking somewhere around maybe 10, maybe. But I would see him probably getting more of like a 2-year deal at less than 10, just based kind of the whole like Manny Pena type contract, where it's like he's a good player. Everyone recognizes he's a good player, but he's not one of the elite players that's on the market right now. And so like he's not going to get the value that he probably deserves.
I do think that his situation could be very similar to Jose Abreu's from last season. So Abreu agreed to the qualifying offer, and then he signed a 3-year contract after that. So I could see that happening with Belt. He's definitely a starting caliber player.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, Abreu, it took 8 days between the time that he accepted his qualifying offer before he got his deal. So, and to be honest, Brandon Belt has been with the Giants for his entire career. And was he one of the guys that was in all 3 World Series, or was he just 12 and 14?
2, the last 2.
But yeah, but he's a staple in that lineup, and he's kind of one of those guys that I just would always imagine would be with that one team his entire career.
Yeah.
And at 34 years old, it kind of seems like that's what he wants too. So yeah, makes a ton of sense. But there are a couple other guys who we weren't sure if they were going to accept or decline their qualifying offers that all ended up declining. But in the cases of Michael Conforto, Chris Taylor, and Raisel Iglesias, what are your thoughts on those 3 declining their QOs?
So Conforto, it doesn't surprise me what happened because he has Scott Boras as an agent, and Scott Boras guys usually like to test the open market. The thing with Conforto is that he's coming off a really down season, like one of the worst seasons of his career. So I feel like this would have been a good chance for him to just take the 18.4 and then try again next year. He's not old. And I fully expect him to have a bounce back season. So I think he's a guy that could potentially not get the contract he's really looking for and be one guy that like has to wait till right at the end of the offseason before he actually signs a contract.
Yeah, I could see that too. And I mean, he's I'm going to say this and I'm going to end up being wrong. So correct me like immediately. Conforto is an outfielder, corner outfielder.
Yep.
And he's not one of the best corner outfielders on the market this year either. Because we've already talked about guys that are joining the market here. And Kyle Schwarber, Jock Peterson, Avisail, Adam Duvall is a free agent now. I would say he's probably kind of along the same lines as Adam Duvall. It's kind of probably better. I think better, but like I would put him more with Duvall as far as his overall skill set than I would with a guy like Schwarber and Jock. So I would have accepted 18.4 if I were in his shoes, but also I'm not a professional athlete and have no talent at all. So what do I know?
Maybe he just wants to leave the Mets. I can't blame him for
That's entirely plausible, actually.
Yeah.
With everything that's going on there last season and this offseason, even wait, was he the one that was in the or was it JD Davis with Lindor and the whole is it a rat or a raccoon thing?
No, that was Jeff McNeil. Right?
McNeil, my bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, there just doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of calm in the dugout or the front office.
There never is. It's New York.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be shocked if he was just trying to leave the Mets, but also I think it's probably more the Scott Boras thing. But yeah.
Well, who's the other guy you said?
Chris Taylor and Raisel Iglesias.
So Taylor had an awesome season. Everyone loves Chris Taylor now. So I think he's going to be a really popular free agent. And I mean, he should get a 3-4 year deal, I think, easily.
Yeah. I liken him to when Kike hit the market. Kind of that same type of guy where he was really good for a long time. People just kind of started to realize he was good in like his last year with the Dodgers. I think Kike got a qualifying offer, if I remember right. Declined it. Ended up going to sign with the Red Sox. Or am I wrong?
I doubt he got the qualifying offer because he signed for like a pretty low money deal, like 14 million for 2 years or something.
Gotcha. But well, my comparison stands. He's kind of along that same line. I think Taylor is probably going to get a lot more value, and he plays a lot more positions too. So he fits pretty much every single team.
And I'm sure the Dodgers would love to just re-sign him back. So
yeah,
they easily could.
And the Dodgers have a lot of money that just came off the payroll this year. So
yep,
we'll see what they do. And then Raisel Iglesias was the last one.
Yeah, so with these relief pitchers, it's always I kind of thought he was going to take this because 18.4 million for 1 year is like very, very good money for a relief pitcher. I guess he thinks he can get a 3-year deal or something, but good luck to him, I guess.
Yeah. So kind of where I'm at here, isn't like even the top end relievers, don't they usually only get like 12 max per year?
I mean, no.
Like, what was
some of these like top tier guys, like I think Kimbrel's making like 16 million this year. Liam Hendricks is making like 16 million or something. So the top tier guys make good money. This is even more than that, or near the top of the closer range.
Yeah. And also, I think Raisel now is not quite as good as Liam Hendricks and Craig Kimbrel when they got their deals. Granted, there's also inflation is factoring in here.
Right. But the one thing about Iglesias is that he can make the case that he's the best free agent available as a relief pitcher this year. The only guy that has a case against him is Kenley Jansen. And he's got a couple years on Iglesias. So maybe Iglesias is the most desirable free agent to sign.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but yeah, I think I still probably would have taken that 1 year deal because he's young enough. He could definitely get a pretty good contract next year if he has a good season. So maybe he's worried that he's not going to have a good season next year, and he's like, I want security.
That's a very legitimate concern for any relief pitcher. I feel like they should always have that. So maybe he's just saying, hey, this is probably my last chance to get a multi-year contract for the rest of my career. I got to take it. I'm coming off a really good season.
That could be. He's what, 28, 29?
He's probably 29 or so.
Yeah. So, it could be.
Yeah.
All right. So we have two other qualifying offers that got declined. Noah Syndergaard. Just talking about the qualifying offer. We'll get to the other part here in a minute. What are your thoughts on him declining
so
it?
So Syndergaard got 21 million coming off a season where he pitched, I think, 2 games in 2021, pitched no games in 2020. For me, this one just seems like a major like overpay, and I don't really see the upside play in signing Syndergaard for that much money. So he's being paid like an elite pitcher for 1 year, and I get the whole there's no such thing as a bad 1 year contract, but what are you really expecting to get from Noah Syndergaard this season? Because he's not going to give you 200 innings. I mean, he might give you 125 like good innings, but is that really worth $21 million?
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know.
well, first of all, the thing that you didn't mention there is he got that contract from the Angels.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, so the Angels went and picked up Syndergaard 1 year, $21 million after he declined an $18.4 million qualifying offer. Even before we get to the Angels contract, I was a little bit shocked that he declined the qualifying offer based off coming off 2 years of not pitching. 18.4 for 1 year where you have a prove it deal. That's exactly what the qualifying offer is for if you're a player. So the fact that he declined it and found a better contract elsewhere, holy cow, good for him. I think he's a Boris client, if I remember right, which would explain a lot. But then on the Angels side, I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I think this is a great deal for the Angels. It's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, especially for a guy who came off 2 years of not pitching, but Thor did rehab last year, came back, had 2 starts, so it's not like he's going to be he's going to have a lot of cobwebs still, but he's not going to be completely in the dark coming into the next year. We saw that his velocity was back up, which is a really good sign, especially for a guy that throws about 100.
I don't think his velocity was back up. I think it was down.
Was it? I thought it was still like
starts, yeah.
I thought it was still at like 98.
It was like a couple miles down from where it usually is.
That's fair.
And then the other thing is, I don't know. I think it's such a risk because the last time he actually pitched a full season in 2019, he was not even close to being what anyone would call an elite pitcher. I think his ERA was like mid fours. He gave up the most runs in the National League. I mean, I just don't see him having that great of a season this year.
So keep in mind, my entire mindset is this is a great deal for the Angels. I'm not saying this is a great deal for any team. So the Angels have always run into the issue where if they signed a starting pitcher, they were signing one of like the top 3rd tier, lower 2nd tier starting pitchers to a multi-year deal, usually 2 years, that they kind of overpay him. He ends up not being very good. Their ceiling isn't very high. Their floor is pretty low. Thor is the complete opposite of that. They're signing him to a 1-year deal, meaning if he bombs or gets hurt, they have no more ties to him after this year. So right off the bat, that's probably the best thing that the Angels have done signing a pitcher in years. His upside is the highest upside of any pitcher they've signed in years. His floor is that he's not going to play any games. Which is bad.
So very risky.
It's risky.
I kind of disagree on the ceiling thing just for this season. I agree he has all-star upside, but for this season, the contribution that you would expect him to give is not going to be worth it just because of the number of innings he's going to provide.
Fair, but they also have an insane need for pitching. And they really don't have the ability to be picky right now. So yeah, they paid a lot of money, but they had to pay him enough to lure him away from the Mets. So if they were going to take a risk, they had to pay more than 18.4. He wasn't going to take it. He would have just stuck with the Mets. So at this point, I kind of think they had to. We've been saying for weeks that the Angels have to overpay for pitching this year. I think when we said that, we were thinking more along the lines of Scherzer or Verlander, but
or Robbie Ray,
or even Stroman. But
what I want to know is what are the Angels going to do from here? So they've just spent $21 million on one starting pitching guy, and they already have 150 million plus committed to players for this season without signing any other pitchers. So, do they have more money to spend, or what's the deal here? I don't know.
I would assume yes, they have more money to spend. My
But do they have
gut.
the money to go get a Robbie Ray, or did they just kill that chance?
See, that I don't know. I think if Raisel Iglesias would have accepted the qualifying offer, then they would have been completely screwed because they would have no more money. But I do think they'll be up close to 200 mil if they're trying to win this year. Which with Shohei at the his kind of interviews recently, he basically said that he was going through a depression because like they weren't playing meaningful baseball. He was just kind of there and sad, and Mike Trout's coming back and they're wasting him. So Artie has to put money down to try and win this year. We've been saying that for years, and I think this year, this is a sign to me that they're going to try that because they're at least going for a guy that has a high ceiling instead of going and signing like your Alex Cobb.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I stand with it. The one other qualifying offer that got declined was Justin Verlander, who is similar to Thor in that he did not pitch last year. He was rehabbing from Tommy John. He ended up declining it and then signing a 1-year, $25 million deal with a 2023 player option with the Astros. Thoughts?
Amazing deal for Verlander. Love it for him. Like 25 million after not having pitched the previous season, like that, you can't beat that really. And he gets to do it with a winning ball club that he has a familiarity with. Like it's ideal for both sides, I think.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to change pitching coaches or anything. He's just going back into
He does
his...
have to change pitching coaches.
Oh, he does?
Brent Strom is not with the Astros anymore. He actually joined the Diamondbacks.
Oh, awkward. Oh, interesting.
Big move for the Diamondbacks.
I just had two entirely different thoughts right there in a row, and you heard the thoughts going through my head, didn't you? Huh, I like that. Yeah, I do think JV might... I mean, he's 39, so the chances that he's the same guy he was in 2019 are pretty slim. He's talented enough, and he's a generational pitcher. He very well could be incredible this year.
I just thought of this today. Like, he's giving me some, like, Tom Brady vibes.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's what I was about to say is, like, he's a generational player. Yeah. He kind of gives me Nolan Ryan, if you're comparing him to a baseball guy, or Tom Brady vibes, where just like, granted, Tom Brady only missed 6 games getting suspended for Deflategate. He didn't really have a full season injury, but he kind of gives you that same air where he's going to come back and he's got the competitiveness and the work ethic and drive and talent to put it all back together and be an elite talent in the league still. So I do think that the Astros are probably not going to regret this deal. And the player option, I don't know what it is, but it's probably kind of on the smaller side just in case something goes badly this year. It doesn't completely screw the Astros for next year as well. I would guess somewhere around 10 to 12 million on the player option, giving him an opportunity to decline it and go get a contract somewhere else if he does really well. So just a hunch. So let's see. I think that wraps up qualifying offers.
One more guy on the qualifying offer is Eduardo Rodriguez, who's already signed a big multi-year deal with the Tigers after he declined the qualifying offer from the Red Sox. So what was it, 5 years, 77 million?
5 years, 77 with incentives that could increase it to 580. Or 581, I think. But yeah, I kind of think that might be an overpay. But at the same time, I don't entirely hate it. It's what, 15.2 AAV?
Yeah.
It's not so like an insane contract.
From these early starting pitching signings is that they're all doing very well in Syndergaard, Verlander, Eduardo Rodriguez, Andrew Heaney got himself a nice deal even after having a really bad season. So
Yeah,
I don't
his
know.
was 1 year, 8.5, with incentives, depending on innings pitched, but I don't know what the incentives were. Jose Barrios getting 7-year, $131 million extension. Like, he would have been a free agent next year, I believe, but the Blue Jays just decided he was their guy. They're locking him up. And at 131, that's not really prohibitive necessarily. I don't know what they're comfortable spending in a year. And they're about to have to start paying for Bo and Kevin and Vlad in not free agency, the other thing. Arbitration. There we go. Assuming arbitration stays. We'll figure out December 2nd. Well, one, if we're going to have a lockout, but if we don't have a lockout, we'll figure out then if we're still going to have an ARB system or how they're going to do that. It might go away. But yeah, so starting pitchers are doing great. There's been 2 relievers signed so far, or re-signed, I guess is probably the better way to phrase it. TJ McFarland signed back with the Cardinals for 1 year at $2.5 million, and Ulysses Chassin at 1 year, $1.25 million. Neither one of them is like they're not generational relievers by any means. TJ McFarland was really good for the Cardinals last year. Actually, I think he started quite a bit for the Cardinals last year. So 1 year, 2.5. I think that's a great deal for a guy of his caliber. So, and then final free agent signing, Manny Pena. So 2 years,
Yeah, so
$8 million.
the Manny Pena thing was kind of like a head scratcher when I saw that happen, because like what are the Braves doing exactly here? They already have like a young catcher and William Contreras. They've got Travis d'Arnaud for a few more years. But then I thought about it and I looked at the free agents that are catchers this year, and wow, it is a desolate group, man. There are no good free agents that are catchers available this year. So the Barnhart move by the Tigers, I love that move for the Tigers because they get that great defensive presence and a guy that can kind of hit at the league average level, and then
Well,
the Braves get.
And I think he'll be a good clubhouse presence when they bring up guys like Torque and a Riley Green sometime next year. So great guy to have around.
Yep. And then Pena is kind of like your ideal backup catcher. So if you're looking for a catcher, you're going to have a tough time, or you need to trade for Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Willie. I do think that they're probably going to try and trade him this offseason, but I don't know who's going to go after him. I haven't thought about it much. We'll have to talk about that here in a future week. All right, so we're almost at an hour and 10 minutes, so I have exactly one more guy that I would like to ask you about, and then I think we call it an episode. What do you think?
Sure.
Jon Gray.
All right, Jon Gray is probably thrilled that he's a free agent and he doesn't have a qualifying offer attached to him. But from the Rockies' perspective, they've bungled this in every step along the way. So they didn't trade him during the 2021 season at the trading deadline. Then they didn't prepare a contract extension offer until like the final few weeks of the season when there wasn't enough time to get the deal done. And then they didn't give him the qualifying offer, so they won't get any pick compensation. So they're basically getting nothing from Jon Gray.
Yeah, and they don't get Jon Gray back to get another shot at it, at trying to do it right next year.
Right.
So,
and it does make sense from any point of view other than the Rockies are just being cheap about it and they don't want to pay him $18.4 million for one season.
Yeah, which with the other free agents on the market, I don't know if he would have got. He wouldn't have got 18.4 as an AAV.
No.
I'm guessing he probably could have got a multi-year deal that would have lured him away from that contract. But with the other guys that have signed so far, I don't know if he would have been in this wave before the qualifying offer deadline. So he very well might have accepted it. He's young enough that he could definitely have a 1-year qualifying offer at 18.4 and then go and become a free agent next year and be one of ideally, and because you always bet on yourself if you're a pitcher, ideally be one of the better guys on the market. But he didn't have to make that decision. The Rockies did for him. I've said it before a lot. I'll say it again for a very long time. They are stupid. I don't think they've done a smart thing in the last... when did they draft Trevor Story? But yeah, so I really should have ended that on a happy note.
Well,
oh well.
I'll throw this one out here before we go. The next deadline after today's qualifying offer deadline is Friday to keep an eye on, and that's the day that teams need to protect their minor league players by putting them on the 40-man roster. So watch out for that.
Yep. So we'll talk about that probably a little bit, not as in depth as we did today, but we'll probably touch on that in our next episode, which next week is Thanksgiving. I will be driving back home on Wednesday night, so we will probably take next week off and come back here in 2 weeks on December 1st. So thank you for joining us today. Once again, you can find our podcast on your favorite podcasting apps and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Let us know your thoughts through the YouTube comments or leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, or by reaching out to us on Facebook or Twitter at Getaway Day Pod. We are planning some pretty good stuff for this offseason, so we will be back hopefully every week after the holiday here, but throughout the holidays we'll be kind of hit or miss. So check out our Facebook and Twitter to know when we're going live. I think that wraps it up. So we will see you in 2 weeks.